Okay, so as always, don't forget the seating survey. And in terms of due dates, the only thing I'm having due this week is homework number 5. I mentioned that on Piazza, which was originally due on Friday of last week, now due Wednesday of this week. Everything else is pushed back until at least next week while we deal with all of the fallout from the exam. So exam debriefing on this. So there are 2 must-watch videos that I put up. So there are links to them in Piazza. I've not added links to Blackboard just yet. I realized this morning that I forgot to do that. I will get it added there, but you can get to it. Get to them either by just going to my YouTube channel and finding them, or by going to the post in Piazza where I announce them, and you can see them. The first of these is a walkthrough of the exam, problem by problem, explaining, doing all of the steps involved in both understanding the problem and in working any calculations that are necessary. It is long, it's an hour, but there are some very good reasons to spend that hour doing it, one of which I'm going to get to in just a second. The second of the videos is a frequently raised objections video that I put together responding to 5 very common objections that were coming up in Piazza. This exam was not like Newton. That's absolutely right. It wasn't, and there are very good reasons why it wasn't like Newton. And I go through that in that video. I would rather you watch the video than me repeat everything that was in the videos right now, but there are a few points that I think are really key that I want to get at here. So in particular, in that this exam was not like Newton, I've been shocked this semester at how many students, when I do something like, say, all right, we're trying to catalog intermolecular forces. Here is a compound. Are there any ions? And I get blank stares, and people don't know how to tell if something has ions in it. Or I say that, well, solving this problem is basically just dimensional analysis. And again, I get blank stares, and people aren't understanding how to perform dimensional analysis. The thing is that in Chem 111, there was a great deal of time and energy spent on issues such as covalent bonding versus ionic bonding, and and telling when you have an ionic compound and a covalent compound. There is a lot of time spent on dimensional analysis, especially in the context of stoichiometry. And I bet you, any of you that took 111 recently, got to 100% mastery of those skills on Newton. And yet this semester, these aren't skills that you are bringing to the new material, where needing to know that information, it needs to be second nature at this point. So that right there is some of the best evidence I can think of that just giving you a Newton-style exam is not actually getting you to know the material to the point where you could actually use it for something. So, so yes, this exam was not like Newton for good reasons. And I actually warned you ahead of time that it was not going to be like Newton. I would like you to definitely pay attention to the explanation I give to that in the video. Another frequently raised objection is I failed the exam. Well, no, you didn't, because all the components of the class essentially just contribute points towards your final grade. They do not have separate letter grades assigned to them. And the final grade scores, as I'm going to go into in a minute, for the class are getting revised significantly right now. And I'm changing the overall perspective on how we're going to be approaching that. So the answer is no, you actually did not fail this exam. Okay. Other issues that were brought up that I'm not going to go into in detail here, complaints that the approach that I'm doing here is, I'm not lecturing to you. You're right, I'm not lecturing to you, but the role of education, the role of the instructor is to is to facilitate learning, not to lecture. And there is a lot of scientific studies that have been done about how lecturing is, despite the fact that lecturing is frequently what students think is the most effective. When you actually look at learning from a lecture class versus alternate approaches, lecturing is always dead last in terms of effective learning. Class takes way too much effort. If you're feeling that, then I wonder if you are working efficiently, if you're using me as a resource as much as you should be, because the goal here is for me to be the guide through you learning and grasping the material. And in order to do that, you have to engage me in the ways that I allow you, in the ways that I offer myself to you. Too much going on to keep track of. So I also go through what all the course components are in light of the goals of the course that I discuss up in the first part. And I am genuinely open to the question, based on what I say up in these, what is it that I can get rid of here? The only one that seemed like it was a reasonable thing to get rid of after going through the explanations for the others would be something like Piazza. But I think a lot of students are finding that there's some value in Piazza right now. So I don't know what to do here. And so I sympathize with the idea that there's a lot going on. One thing that will help you keep track of what's going on is to actually attend class, because I tell you everything that's going on as I'm doing it, and to read the announcement Piazza posts, which give you, in as clear a way as I can imagine, a day-by-day breakdown of what's happening. Okay, and then this 30-minute video for frequently raised objections talks about what are we going to do moving forward, and there are some things that I'm doing to move forward that I list in there, and there's some things that I'm requesting from you as well. And so I'm going to ask that you take a look at this video. Now, since I have pushed back the everything except for homework 5 this week, I'm hopeful that you will actually spend the time with these two videos to understand some of what's going on with them. One thing that came up in a Piazza discussion that, excuse me, that did not make it into these videos because the Piazza discussion was after I'd made the videos, was reminding me that I had hoped to be able to set up I had hoped to be able to set up a way that a later question that depends on an answer from a prior question would be graded based upon the answer you gave to the prior question, rather than independently based on on what the correct answer is. And I tried extremely hard to find a way to implement that approach to the automatic grading, and was unable to find a way to do it. So we were left with what we had. But I want to be able to do that so that you can get partial credit in those cases. So I am going to be putting together a regrade request form where I'm going to go through the exam, identify which answers depend on which other answers. You can then make a you can then fill out that form and send it to me about which ones you think should be graded correctly in your exam based upon your earlier answers, and then I will take that into account and go in and manually see about regrading in that way. Now, my request on this is that in order to do that, please actually watch the exam walkthrough so that you can see how the problems are actually done, okay? All right. Okay, I saw that there were some questions coming up in the chat here. So because things are being pushed back, will that make double the work due the following week? No. So what is going to happen is that I'm going to reshuffle somewhat what is going on in each week, and so that will slightly increase the workload in several weeks over, but it's not going to be, it'll be like adding one extra video or one short section of a Newton assignment or something like that. And that's going to end up getting spread. So I'm going to be changing sort of the breakdown of what's happening in each week is how that's going to work. So test corrections, I've never implemented that, and I've never actually been taught using test corrections, but I think that this regrade approach is a similar idea. So if you want to, if it's not similar to what I just described, if test corrections isn't similar to what I just described, then feel free to send me an explanation of what you mean by test corrections, and if that seems like a better approach, I'm happy to go with that. Another question from the chat: will a test be curved based on the graph that was put out yesterday? The test is not going to be curved, but there are going to be ways, but I am adjusting the overall course grading scheme, and I'm changing I'm trying to implement a different view on how the scores work, and so I go into that in detail in this video here, and I'm going to describe it in just a few minutes. And so in a sense, the course is going to be curved, but yes, but I'm going to talk about that in a second, so just hold on with that, okay? All right. Right. So this was boy, that's not actually coming through very well on the screen, is it? So on Piazza, I have a version of the grades on the exam graph that you may be able to see better than what you see here. The mean was a 30 with a standard deviation of 11. The range of scores was from a 4 up to an 82. I am quite impressed with the 82. That's quite good. So what I want to point out here is that if we look at the points for the course grade, we have 100 points out of 1,000 for participation, which is entirely based on posts to Piazza. So every student, just by posting or commenting or answering or something once per week, can get the full 100 points for participation. Is there a letter grade associated with that? No, it's points toward the final grade. Homeworks, same thing, with the exception of the supplementary questions, which we've stopped doing, and I may or may not reintroduce that at some point, and I certainly won't reintroduce it until I'm caught up on grading. So the Newton parts, which is going to, in the end, be very close to the full grade, since 2 of the homeworks get dropped. Pretty much every student in the class is getting 100% on those. The content video quizzes, because people are gaming the system and rewatching the videos so many times until they get the full points on the quiz, pretty much everybody has 100% on all the content video quizzes as well, which means that for the overall grade, everyone has a total of 300 points already. Now, if I look at the level of understanding that those 300 automatic, not automatic because it does take work, but the 300 points that just by putting in the work, you are absolutely able to get with no problem, I look at that and say, given that that is basically giving you regurgitation of information and is giving you the, I have demonstrated that I can do calculations that are exactly like calculation types that I've had before. But it does not in any way test a true understanding of the material, which is what the exam was designed to do. I look at that and say 300 points based on this, the mastery level associated with just that is probably about a CC minus kind of level of demonstration of understanding and knowledge. And so what I am doing is I am saying that the final grading scale for the course, 300 points, is going to be a C minus for the course. So you could get zeros on all of the exams and pass the course just by putting in the work. The exams and the activities are designed to take you past that minimum. So I don't understand the point on an exam of asking a question that I expect the entire class to be able to answer correctly, because everybody's going to get it right. That gives me no new information. I only ask questions on exams that I expect that some people will not get right. So I have taught classes before where the overall course grade, 20% is a D, 40% is a C, 60% is a B, 80% is an A. Because of this philosophy of I don't see the point of asking you a question where I know you are going to get it right. So these tests should be thought of, and the group activities should be thought of as, okay, I've demonstrated I can do the mechanics in Newton. Now, if I want to bump my grade above the C minus, I'm going to show that I understand the material to a point where I can actually use it or draw connections between things and use it in a meaningful way. So what I'm planning to do, I do not yet have the details on what exactly that new scale is going to be for the final course grade, but what I'm going to do is look at this particular exam, and I'm going to say, all right, you know, it's a pretty good-looking bell curve right here. And you typically want the middle of a bell curve, if it's looking like a bell curve, to be in the probably CC plus kind of range, right? Well, I've already given you a C minus for this, but I'm going to say that, you know, the middle of the bell curve here, we're going to have people in the middle of this getting Bs if you continue to perform in this way, okay? In that kind of level, because you're pushing the boundaries of what you know. So performing this region is going to get you into a B, and there are going to be A's up in this region, no question. And now that you've seen these exams, you're going to be doing better on them, okay? There was another important point that I just lost in my head. Oh, right, and I also fully agree that this exam was too hard. I mean, based on the grade here, this was too hard. But if the mean is closer to a 50, then that actually, I think, is relatively good, because that's a mean of a 50. There's going to be a good way to, that gives me the best discrimination between performance levels. So, so I will be scaling back the difficulty of some of the future exams as well. In addition to this, I am going to, I can't do it until I have the details of the scale where the grade cutoffs are looking like they're going to be. Once I have that, I'm going to be posting a grade projection spreadsheet that you all can use. And this printout of it I know is too small to see, but let me explain to you how it's going to work so that you can see how you will be able to monitor your progress and see what's going on. So each of these columns that have yellow and green, the yellow is places where you can put information in. The green are areas where things are calculated. Okay, so we have homeworks, we have content video quizzes, participation, group activities, exams, and extra credit. And the idea here is that there are two yellow columns. There's the actual grade that you have that you put in the left-hand column, and so you will have some real grades you put in there. The yellow column in the middle is for playing what-if scenarios. What if on the next few assignments I get X, whatever you put in there, or on the exams you get a certain point. And then the green column is taking into account your actual grades and your what-if scenario. If you don't have something listed in those, then what it does is it assumes, okay, you're probably going to perform the same way that you have so far. So it takes an average of the grades in that category so far, and then plugs it in as probably what you're going to do on the future ones. And then it drops the lowest in places where the syllabus says things are going to get dropped, and it totals everything up over here to the right, and it gives you a total score, and it tells you the letter grade that would be based upon the grading scale, which, like I said, I am going to have that determined within a day or two. And then it also calculates up for you here how many more points you would need in order to get to the next grade level cutoff. And so that way, and this also takes into account, over in the exam section, redemption points. So you can go in and say, all right, I'm really going to focus my studying on exam 1 because I want my midterm exam 1 grade raised up. And so let's suppose that instead of the 30 that I got if I was an average student here, let's suppose I get a 50% on that portion of the final, and it will automatically bump in the calculation here your midterm up to that 50 that it does. So this spreadsheet does all of that for you and lets you play those what-if scenarios so you'll be on top of what it is you're going to be aiming for in various areas. Okay, so let's see. There's some comments or questions from the chat. Suggestion for the next exam. Could you make a practice exam? I would love to be able to do that. The problem for the first exam was that in trying to keep up with content videos and questions on Piazza and all these sorts of things, I had a very hard time having the time to be able to make the exam, and in addition to that, be able to make a second exam that would be similar to it. That's really, really tough to do. I would love to be able to do that. I felt as though giving you guys the systems sheet gave you a pretty good idea of some of the things that should be in there. So for example, having the system sheet ahead of time, you see in system 1 with the salt water that you have solubilities of all of the ions in a unit that you've not used very much, the parts per thousand by mass. And that's the only one of the 4 systems that is dealing with solubility or the dissolved solutions. So you could pretty easily predict, I'm going to need those in either molality or molarity or mole fraction in order to do a colligative properties problem, because there would have to be colligative properties problem. So before the exam even starts, you go through and you figure out, how do I convert from parts per thousand by mass to molarity? So you would know, you could have come in with those, at least knowing how to do that calculation ahead of time, and you could have actually gone through and done the calculations. On system number 2, there was talk of the interstitial spaces in a face-centered cubic structure. Given that, and given that the discussion in class across at least 2 weeks, whenever someone came up, said what kinds of questions are going to be on the exam, I mentioned specifically that I'm not going to ask you something where you just take the formula that you get from face-centered cubic, but I might ask you something about, say, the interstitial spaces if it were an ionic compound. So, given that you saw that, and given that as well, in class both Wednesday and Thursday of last week, I went through exactly the same kind of example using the body-centered cubic structure. You could know that going into the exam that there was almost certainly going to be a question asking for the size of the interstitial space in a face-centered cubic structure. You had all that information, you could have had that calculation already done, and you could have asked about it on Piazza or asked me in office hours and made sure you got that calculation correct. So if you look at the topic list that was again posted on Piazza, and you look at the system information document, you could very easily pick out any topic on the topic information document and know which one of those systems is going to apply to. And then at that point, say, okay, how can I ask a question about that? And if you can't come up with the kind of question you'd ask about that, ask me. Okay, I can tell that, what's a good example? I can tell that there have to be phase change information that would come in, phase change questions that it seems like the best place for that would be dealing with the atmospheres of Mars and Venus. But what kind of question can you ask? Well, let's talk about it. So you have a range of conditions on Mars. Okay, what can you do with that information? Well, you could imagine a cooling curve or a heating curve associated with it. So, and if you can't come up with that, then I am happy to do that brainstorming with you in office hours, in class, that sort of thing. So while it's not the same thing as a practice exam, it nonetheless is a way for you to orient yourself to where you're going to see those questions ahead of time so that it's not any kind of surprise when they come up. Okay, continuing down some chat comments here. To play devil's advocate, having the positive reinforcement of being able to demonstrate the knowledge we've gained from things like Newton and the content videos on exam would be beneficial to building off that knowledge. Well, I understand that, but I also feel that getting the 100% from Newton is, which is counting it toward your grade, is a positive reinforcement there as well. And the goal for me in the exams is to see, what do you understand, not that. And so do you really want me to make the exams longer? I'd prefer to not make the exams longer. I'd prefer to make the exams shorter. Okay, so to clarify, getting answers correct on an exam only helps our grade instead of the traditional way that missing question hurts your grade. Well, so since this is accumulating points towards the final grade, yes, that's exactly right. So if you put in the work and on Newton, on the content videos, and in participation on Piazza, you have a C-, okay? You're only going to get a D or lower if you don't put in the work. And so anything you do on the exam, yes, any points you get there helps your grade move it above a C-. Okay. So let's see. So we have comments saying that at least a few questions that we can think about. I can certainly try to do that. It's hard to do that until the exam is written, and because this is the first time I'm teaching this class in a COVID environment where so much of it has to be online, that there's a lot of content generation that I'm having to do. So in this particular case, I only had the exam written about 2-3 days before the exam was available. So it's really tough to give you practice questions when I don't fully have it written myself. But yes, if I am able to do so, I will try to get you some practice questions. I would almost rather a proctored exam if it was easier than what we have to do with it being non-proctored. I understand that idea. I understand that motivation. The problem is I've had many conversations with faculty who have done the proctored versions of the exams using the online proctoring systems, and every one of them, to a person, has said, connection issues and the automated artificial intelligence software that's looking at you to see are your eyes straying from the work too often and things like that end up causing so many problems that it is absolutely not worth it to do it. And so I know it's a great idea in concept, but it's not very practical given the state of the technology right now. All right. I don't know what no cap means. Even after taking the exam, I don't even know how I would go about studying better for the next one. Well, that's one of the things that I hope that going through the exam walkthrough video will help you with. You'll be able to see the kinds of, the way that the information feeds in. And as I said, I am absolutely happy to brainstorm with you in class, in online office hours on Piazza about what kinds of questions could be asked on this kind of material. And I'm going to reiterate that I was asked that question several times specifically about unit cell types, and the example that I used was finding space for cations within an anion lattice. So that's the kind of conversation that we can have that can help guide you along. Will there be a systems page for all the future exams? I think there probably will, because it gives you a way to do the kinds of predictions of what kinds of questions are likely to be there, so that since it's so hard to come up with a practice exam for an exam of this type, that gives you a way to get yourself familiar with it. Just because there's a system information does not mean that we will know exactly what to study and be prepared for the kind of stuff that was on that exam. Well, as I described, the systems information was not the only thing you had. You had a topic list as well that was posted on Piazza. And the correlation between the two tells you which topic is probably going to be in which system. And so that at least gives you a direction. So you could then say, well, that list of compounds at the end in System 4, I'm seeing some 3D geometries here. Where on earth, why on earth would I need to look at 3D geometries? Well, the only thing I can think of is polarity, because sometimes based on the geometry, the dipole moments of the bonds cancel out and sometimes they don't. So, so maybe there's something about polarity. Let's ask Osman a question on how do we determine polarity on one of these molecules. Okay, there were too many extraneous variables that we had no experience dealing with that made it difficult to apply the tools we knew. Okay, so there are two things I want to talk about that one. One of them is that the part of understanding, rather than just knowing and being able to, knowing facts and being able to do a problem of exactly the type you've seen before. Part of a measure of understanding is knowing, to get a piece of information, what information do I need to have to do it? That's one of the main metrics of, do I understand it? And so that's one reason there was extra information that was provided. Because that is actually getting at, do you understand the concepts that you're looking at? The second idea is that I have said many, many times in class and on Piazza, don't memorize formulas, don't memorize procedures to do things, because a lot of what's going on in chemistry is that there are relationships that can be related to each other using the general procedure of dimensional analysis. So I want to go through an example of that. So on the exam, there was a question, I think it was 14 or 15, that was about the height of a column of seawater necessary to counteract the osmotic pressure of seawater. And in a previous question, you had already determined the osmotic pressure of seawater, which the correct answer for that was 223 atmospheres. And you were given the information that a 1 meter column of seawater had a pressure that it applied of 0.123 atmospheres. What that means is, this is a conversion factor. 223 atmospheres, 0.123 atmospheres is equivalent to 1 meter of seawater. So you take 223 divided by 0.123, and that tells you how much seawater you need. This is a very straightforward application of dimensional analysis, just using a relationship, a specific relationship you haven't seen before. So one of the things I am planning to do over this week in particular, and I'm going to do more right now in class today, is try to address some deficiencies that people have in their Chem 111 understanding. Dimensional analysis is a topic that was hit very hard in 111, and like I've said, a lot of people are still uncomfortable with using it and are still asking for the formula for something, when that's not how you solve chemistry problems, not by formulas. You do it by dimensional analysis. And this is a technique, a problem-solving technique that is so central to solving chemical problems that it has to be second nature by this point. And so I'm going to spend time today going through that in order to help address that deficiency. Okay, so those are two examples of extraneous variables. You know, so this whole connection between so one of them is, it's there on purpose so that you can demonstrate, do you understand what information actually relates to what you're trying to find. And secondly, some of the stuff that looks extraneous in what's a confusing question is there specifically so that you can answer that question. All right. So afterwards, I showed my girlfriend who's an OChem, and she didn't even know what most of the questions said. If people have already taken the class can't even understand the questions, then what's the point? I can't speak to your girlfriend's experience. What I am doing is preparing you to be able to use the information in Chem 112 wherever it's going to be. So think about, you are in Chem 112 for a reason. That reason may be that your major, which is probably not chemistry, requires Chem 112, and they are requiring Chem 112 for a reason. They are requiring Chem 112 because some of their content depends upon being able to apply Chem 112 material to their content. And the application of Chem 112 material to their content will not look like a Newton question. It's not. It's going to be, do you understand the ideas so you can apply it in your particular major's context? And so that's what I'm trying to prepare you for. Not all professors do that. Not all professors try to do that. But I have a history of, when people come out of my class, I have professors from other classes later seek me out to tell me how much the students that come out of my class know compared to what they're used to. So I'm not going to apologize for that. That's I am really focused on making sure you understand it, not just can regurgitate it. Because if you know the procedure and then stop practicing the procedure, you're going to forget the procedure. You'll start to lose it the minute you stop practicing it. If you understand the procedure, if you understand why the procedure works, then that's going to be with you for life. Okay. 10 possible options for multiple choice got me, and you can select multiples of them too. Yep, because life is not a multiple choice exam. Life is not. There are multiple choices. There are multiple things that happen. Have I had a grading system like this in the past? Yes, absolutely I have. I mentioned the case where I mentioned a case where I've done that. I've had the course grade at 20% for a D, 40% for a C, and so on. Yes, I've absolutely done a grading system like this. All right, so I am now going to look at some things here. One suggestion that came up on Piazza was providing an equation sheet. I am absolutely happy to do that, but the issue with doing that is that so much of chemistry solving chemistry problems is not related to equations, it's related to dimensional analysis. Converting two units of concentration between each other is dimensional analysis. It's, if you learn the procedure to convert from molarity to molality, then you know how to do that one conversion. But if you understand dimensional analysis, you can convert from any unit system to any unit system. And so I'm going to do a brief introduction to dimensional analysis because this is such a fundamental skill that you have got to have it in order to succeed in chemistry. The procedure for dimensional analysis, it can be thought of very straightforwardly. Start with what you know. Multiply by 1. Repeat step 2 as needed for arrive at your answer. Now, when I write it this way, steps 2 and 3 sound useless, and step 4 sounds like magic. But what I'm going to do is show you how a clever, careful use of step 2 can turn this into the most powerful problem-solving tool in chemistry that you can have. The first thing is to expand our understanding of what we mean by 1. And to illustrate that, think about a problem in basic math where you're trying to add 1/2 plus 1/4 to get an answer. In order to do that, we multiply 1/2 by 1, just written differently. We multiply it by 2 over 2. 2 over 2 is 1, and when you multiply something by 1, you don't change its value. You just change how it's expressed. So here's an example of where multiplying by 1 in a careful, clever way lets you put this into a form that lets you solve the problem you need. Now, let's extend the idea of multiplying by 1 a little bit further than that even. Think about the relation 1 foot equals 12 inches. All right? Hope everybody agrees that that is a true thing to write. Let's divide both sides by 12 inches. So then we have 1 foot over 12 inches equals 1. Now, what this means is that this thing here, if we multiply something by it, doesn't change what you have. So if you have 16.3 inches of something, then multiplying that by 1 foot over 12 inches to get whatever the result is when you do that, the inches cancel and you're left with the same thing but just now measured in feet. That is the essence of dimensional analysis. That is what you are doing. So the general idea here is that what you take what you start with what you know. So suppose you have a solution that is 5.3 molar. Well, molar, let's rewrite that as moles solute over liters solution. Okay. And we want to get this into maybe molality. So instead of memorizing a formula to do that, what you do now is you look at the units that you're starting with and the units you're trying to get to. So you want to get this to moles solute over kilograms solution, if we're going to molality. So you know what you start with, you write its units down explicitly, you know what you're aiming for, and you see how do I get these units into those units by multiplying by 1 repeatedly. So moles of solute stay the same. We now need to go from liters of solution to kilograms of solution, and so you need to have some kind of conversion factor that will let you do that. And so if it's a dilute aqueous solution, then we know that 1 liter, 1,000 milliliters, and then 1 milliliter is 1 gram of water, and then 1,000 grams is 1 kilogram. So all it is going through and doing that. I'm not going to go through it here, but here's an example where you can solve this problem that has nothing to do with chemistry entirely by dimensional analysis. You and your 3 friends want to take a round trip to Mexico City and want to split the gas cost evenly. You have the distance to Del Rio from Boise, which is on the border. You have the distance from Del Rio to Mexico City. Cost of gas in Boise, which we use for the US parts, cost of gas in Mexico City, which we use in the Mexico parts, gas mileage of your car, and then a bunch of conversion factors. So you notice you have pesos that are going to need to get converted to dollars. You have liters that are going to need to get converted to gallons for miles per gallon, that sort of thing. And simply by doing 2 calculations using this information and dimensional analysis, you can answer a question and you've never used a formula. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to address some more questions in the chat. Why are we doing Newton if it doesn't help us with the exam? It does help you with the exam because it gives you the baseline calculation experience that the understanding of why you're doing the calculations requires in order to be able to apply it. But the point of doing the Newton also is to demonstrate that baseline understanding, that baseline capability, which is what gets you the C- in the class, the minimal understanding of the material. I think we understand dimensional analysis. It's more that the questions on the exam were very, very difficult to know what to be applying to answer them. Well, so that is part, so I understand that some of you understand dimensional analysis. The thing is that I have seen so many cases where in class, I go through an example problem and I say the rest of this is dimensional analysis just to get it into the right units, and I get blank stares when I do that. So that's why I was going through this particular example. So it's more that the questions on the exam were difficult to know what to be applying to answer them. Well, and that is why you look at what exactly is the question asking for, what units is it in, and what information am I given that could lead me there. That's part of understanding, is to try to figure out those connections. And if you go through, and as I am requesting, watch the exam walkthrough video, what I really want from feedback from you is specifically on question 31, for example, I'm pulling a number out of the air. I now see how you do that calculation, but I couldn't see that this was what you were asking for because this aspect of it wasn't clear. Because that kind of information helps me see where there's a leap of logic that I don't think is a leap of logic, but you do think is a leap of logic. And so if I understand if you can tell me where that disconnect is, I can A, try to fix that disconnect so that I can fill in the gap that's there, and B, it will help me in crafting future questions. Okay. This example is in no way the level of question that I was asking on the exam. Well, this example is exactly the level of question that was in questions 1 through 11, which was converting from parts per thousand by mass to molarity. It was exactly, the one I gave here was even, the example I gave here was even harder than the example I used here to get the column of water height that you're looking at. It's frustrating that I'm putting my best foot forward in this class, showing up to Zoom, doing the work, attending office hours, and then get a failing grade. And I'm repeating to you now that that you are not getting a failing grade through Newton, through the content videos, through participation. You are getting a C-, and demonstrating an understanding beyond the level of this minimal Newton level knowledge is what is going to get you a grade higher than a C-. And one of the things that I go through in this content video here is exactly how, in the class sessions, in the content videos, and in the small group activities, which in my opinion are the most important parts of this course, I am specifically teaching you those skills to be able to make the connections and to be able to move past the Newton level understanding. The problem that we have is that in each of those cases, many people in the class are circumventing the carefully designed learning steps that are built into those processes. On the small group activities, I was very dismayed to find, even after the second one, that many groups took these set of questions and divided them amongst the members of the group to answer. And what the goal of these small group activities is to go through a logical argument from start to the end of the argument. And what's important is the thinking process that takes you from question 1 to question 2, from question 2 to question 3. It is giving you specifically that progress, that practice in doing the kind of thinking that that tests your understanding rather than the repetition of a procedure. The questions in so any group that divided up the questions that way, any group that divided up the questions in that manner is circumventing the specific learning process that would allow you to succeed on the exams. In the content videos, the questions in the quizzes that I am asking you are the same thing. I present you the information, I present you the thinking process, and then ask a question that you absolutely should be able to figure out based upon the information you have just been given. And thinking through the information you've been given to arrive at that answer is the process that is teaching you how to think in the way that will allow you to succeed on the exam. Unfortunately, what I've discovered is that students are taking these exams up to 10, 15 times so that they can hear the explanation that comes after the question, write down the answers, go through it to get 100%, which is not the intent. Doing that is circumventing the learning process that the quiz questions in the content videos are specifically asking you to do. So what I'm tempted to do, and before you freak out about it, I'm not going to, but what I am tempted to do in order to force you to do the quizzes in the way that they are intended is to make the quizzes a single attempt only. So that you're forced to go through and actually think about the questions and try to answer them as you go through. I'm not going to do that because I know that that two things are likely to happen. One of them is that a connection issue would disconnect you and you'd lose your one chance. The second is that the second is that what students would end up doing, again, circumventing the process, would be, okay, I'm paused on this quiz question. It's now high stakes. And so I'm going to go, I'm going to leave this video up. I'm going to go on a Google hunt or a Piazza hunt to try to find the answer, which again circumvents the whole thinking process that's supposed to be going into the process. So, so I'm not going to do that. But the point here is that I have built into, oh, I'm sorry, the third one, in the class sessions, when I'm working an example problem or talking through a series of concepts and making connections, I am frequently asking a question to the class, and almost nobody answers. I sit here silent, waiting for somebody to engage in the process. There's a specific reason I do that. It's because the process of thinking about what I just asked and making a stab at the answer is the thing you are supposed to be learning at that point. But people aren't answering. They're waiting for somebody else to answer or waiting for me to get tired of waiting and give you the answer at the end. So in all three of the cases where I am specifically teaching you the skills necessary to succeed on an exam of this type, members in the class are circumventing those learning steps. That's a problem. Okay. I'm not sure about anyone else, but this class is the first time I've heard the term dimensional analysis used rather than stoichiometry or conversion. So I think that's where some of the confusion comes from when you say the rest is dimensional analysis. Okay, well then thank you for pointing that out. Dimensional analysis, there are certainly plenty of people who don't use the term dimensional analysis. I think some teachers, some instructors of 111 probably think that it's a frightening word for people, so they don't use it. The problem with calling it stoichiometry is that it's useful for so much more than stoichiometry. It can be used for anything. And the problem with calling it a unit conversion is that it sounds like it's a single step, when in fact, I have on a regular basis dimensional analysis problems that take up 2 or 3 lines of conversions to get from the start to the end. So when will the next small group activity be? So I'm planning to release it next week to be due the following week. This is, and as a preview for this, it's going to be on kinetics, and it's going to focus on radioactive decay as applied to the question of determining the age of the Earth. Doing it as a group takes like 4 hours, just FYI, valuable, but can be difficult to coordinate. I recognize it can be difficult to coordinate. If it is taking you 4 hours, then I recommend that you take a break in that on the parts that you're confused on and call me in either on Piazza or office hours to try to help with that, because I can see these activities taking maybe 2 hours, but if it's taking 4 hours, then I think you're beating your head against a wall on some things where there may be a more efficient way to use your time, and call me in on stuff. So I can frequently clear up in 10 or 15 minutes something that you're going to beat your head against for an hour, and use me as a resource to do that. The way these questions are worded is not very easily understood. You might understand it, but we don't, because we weren't given prior questions to help us make our brain process the question that way. Okay, so that will be an easier thing to address in terms of a specific example, and so that will help me understand what it is you're not understanding about what's the way it's worded, and then some of my explanations, I think, will may help give you some guidance about how to approach reading one of these questions. So again, watch the exam walkthrough video while you're in preparation for submitting your request for regrades. Hopefully that will help you some. And then if you can write down, this one was confusing, and it was confusing in this way. You said this and I didn't know what it meant, or something like that. Then I can both try to clear up the question, clear up the confusion, and I can try to understand what it is that was confusing about it and modify how I word some of the questions. Okay, I like the group activities and thought they were the most helpful tool for applying concepts. Thank you, I agree, absolutely. They are, in my opinion, the group activities are the most important part of this class because they are the place where you are applying the information beyond the specific Newton-style problems. So I agree with you entirely on that. I agree the group assignments are helpful in thinking that way, but it's hard to know if we are thinking right and if we don't have any way to check our work. Well, something that's confusing on it, you can post to Piazza. I will respond. If something that's confusing on it, you can post as a muddiest point in class, and I can talk about it in class. You can come to the office hours and do that. But the whole idea of thinking rather than remembering is to try out hypotheses. You try it out and see does it make sense or see if it doesn't, and then learn from whether it was or not. You have to not be afraid to try it, to try things. I think he meant for the exam to be like the group assignments, but there was some disconnection. There's a sense in which I wanted it to be like the group activities, because the thinking process that I'm trying to teach in the group activities is the same as the thinking process I'm trying to test on the exams. But I'm also, the group activities are focused on one or at most a very small number of ideas that we want to get at, and I'm trying to have you construct the understanding of something deep. Whereas in the exams, I don't want to go that deep. I want it to be an application of what you know, but yes, in a new context. So there's a connection, but they definitely have different goals. This class is going to make me an alcoholic. I'm sorry, that's certainly not the goal. I certainly have to say that last night I had a couple of drinks. I apologize. All right, just as devil's advocate, I've had one teacher in my life who taught like this, and he was the most valuable teacher I ever had. It might be difficult to shift the mentality of learning, but it is effective. Again, thank you for saying that. I definitely, that's my goal. My goal is to be the guide that can help you to an understanding. And I will go sleepless weeks to put in the effort that you need to understand something. But I've got to stop having empty office hours. I've got to stop having very few questions submitted to Piazza for me to try to address in class. I've got to have you guys coming to me and saying, I don't get this, and so that I can then say, all right, let's fix it. So, okay, how are we on time here? So I've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I didn't have anything else specifically I wanted to go over. I really, really want you to watch those 2 videos if you have not already. Pay attention to upcoming Piazza posts when I post the revised grading scale for the class and the grade projection spreadsheet, so you have it. I'm also going to be putting together one of the things I said I was going to do is have an equation sheet for each exam. I'm going to go ahead and make that for exam 1 so that you have it in preparation for the final exam later, and I don't want to just forget that I need to do that, so I want to get it in your hands so that you can see what that kind of thing is going to look like. I would really want you to go through the exam both from the perspective of regrades in cases where a later question depended on an incorrect earlier question, so that I can try to give you points back for that. I will post how the regrade procedure is going to work very shortly as well. And I want you to spend a little bit of time looking at a couple of the questions. If everybody does 1 or 2 questions where they were confused and not able to grasp what was being asked, and spend some time on just that one or 2 of those questions and try to express to me where the logical leap was that I thought you would be able to do that you weren't able to do. That information to me will be really helpful, both to bridge the gap and to change how I am presenting the information so that what I thought was clear actually measures up in terms of clarity to what you need. So please, you don't have to do the whole exam because there are 200 of you, and that would be a lot of information coming into me from everybody. But if everybody does 1 or 2 questions, that will be really valuable. Maybe even start a thread on Piazza and brainstorm it with other people so that you can construct this is something that was confusing for a lot of people, and maybe some other wording would have worked. That would be great. So thank you. Thank you for listening to me. It is not my goal at all to fail the class, to fail everybody in the class. That is not going to happen. And I hope you can see how the way that I'm changing the grading scale ensures that that's not going to happen. I'm also not going to teach a class where the entire class gets a C-. I'm not going to do that either. But I am going to emphasize very strongly understanding the material. And I go into detail in this video. I've lost my video sheet. Oh, I have it up already. I go into detail in this video on what I mean by understanding. Thank you. Oh, another question here. Will you have a standard curve for the next exam? So what I've just described here is how I am curving the course as a whole. Since what you're doing is accumulating points towards that course grade, it doesn't make a lot of sense to curve an individual assignment too much. Particularly, I mean by after the test creating the graph. Oh, do you mean am I going to show you what the results are? Yes, okay, absolutely, yeah. I'm gonna show grade distributions as we go through so everybody knows where the mean is and those sorts of things. And one of the things I'm gonna be doing is I'm going to be looking as if I find out that the new grading scheme that I'm giving you is not shifted enough to have the effect that I want, I'll shift it even more. Okay, this is something I'm going to keep my finger on the pulse of this to do everything I can to make sure that both you guys can meet my high expectations, and I know I have high expectations. I'm going to make sure that you can meet those, and that a good faith effort to meet those high expectations is going to be rewarded. So thank you for paying attention. So anybody that is here, you are probably in the scheduled for Monday, Wednesday class session. I know there are plenty of people in the Tuesday, Thursday class session that don't come to the Monday, Wednesday, as it should be. You guys shouldn't have to come to class sessions that you are not signed up for. But what that means is that tomorrow is going to be essentially a repeat of today. And so Do not feel like you need to, if any of you were thinking about coming in today, you don't need to, or excuse me, if any of you were thinking about coming in tomorrow, you don't need to because you've heard all of this and had the conversation already. Thank you, and we are going to move forward and we're going to make this work.